Bijan Robinson is a complete running back because he combines athletic upside with the savvy nuance of a longtime veteran running back.
You are Locked On Falcons, your daily Atlanta Falcons podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
So guys, you know me, I'm Aaron Freeman, aka Mr. Drew, aka Sirius Black, and the very humble host of this illustrious Locked On Falcons podcast, your daily Atlanta Falcons podcast, part of the Locked On Sports Atlanta podcast family, your team every day. And make sure you follow in the footsteps of our everydayers, the people that listen to this podcast as their first listen each and every day. And we thank all those people, but follow in their footsteps so that you can be thanked by subscribing or following for free on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts to get the latest episode as soon as it is available. So today's episode, guys, I am joined by my guest, Matt Waldman, breaks down the rookie scouting portfolio at his website, mattwaldman.com or mattwaldmanrsp.com. And I've been bringing Matt on this podcast since, I think, the summer of 2017 when I had him talking about Brian Hill and his potential in Atlanta. And he's come back on many times over the years. Recently, a month or so ago, multiple times in April to talk about the quarterbacks, receivers, and running backs in this draft class. And we didn't talk really about Bijan that much in that episode when we talked about the running backs, because I figured if the Falcons wound up drafting Bijan Robinson, I could just bring Matt back to talk specifically about that. And that is, of course, what we are doing on today's episode. So if those of you that are still out there being like, hey, you know, why is there so much Bijan content? And why is podcast turned from Locked On Falcons to Locked On Bijan? You know, we'll talk about other guys, more on that towards the end of today's episode. But I'm not getting tired of talking about Bijan Robinson. Are you guys tired of talking about Bijan Robinson? I mean, you know, for my everydayers, guys, right? You know, the people that have been listening every single day since the fall, he's special, right? Bijan, because my everydayers know that he won over Jarvis Davis, guys. Right? Jarvis ain't about nothing but trenches, man. And he won over Jarvis. So, like, my everydayers understand that this is a big deal. So, Bijan's a big deal. So, we'll continue to talk about Bijan with Matt Waldman on today's Locked On Falcons. All right, everyone. We are back with another illustrious guest. Returning to Locked On Falcons is Matt Waldman, the creator of the rookie scouting portfolio. He's also a contributor over at the Football Guys for those of you that want to get those fantasy tips and insights. And Matt is going to be here with us talking quite a bit about Bijan Robinson, the Falcons' newest running back. And Matt, you know, last time we talked, you know, you told me, hey, I'm not just a running backs guy, even though I often have you on this podcast to talk running backs. But now it feels like we get the opportunity to talk about a very special running back, and that is Bijan Robinson. But Matt, my friend, welcome back to the show.
Oh, thank you so much. And it's always fun to get to talk about the position, but I like to, you know, always remind folks occasionally, because I get called a lot about running backs for sure. And it's a favorite position of mine. And it's nice to be in town here in Atlanta and get a chance to be able to talk about a terrific prospect.
And Bijan is a player that I called a complete running back. I'm curious, how do you feel about that statement, and sort of what are his strengths and what are the potential weaknesses if he has any?
I think it's a 100% correct or accurate statement to make. He is a complete running back, and what you're going to see is a player who runs with power, who has top end speed, has the acceleration you're looking for from a high end starter, and he has the movement skills and patience that you're looking for from a back who can run a variety of blocking schemes that you'd want to see. Well, Atlanta, you know, they like to run a lot of gap plays than what you saw with Tyler Algier, and outside zone, but he can also run inside zone for you. And then on top of that, you can split him out. And while even the top running backs in the NFL that are receivers get very few looks as slot receivers or outside receivers, the threat of what they can do can open up a lot for your offense and other personnel. And when you have Cordero Patterson and you have the receiving talents of a guy like Tyler Algier who can leak out of the backfield, and then you add Bijan Robinson to the mix, who can run post patterns, at a level where he can track the ball and take hard contact from defensive backs and earn the target. And he does that both on routes breaking inside and outside from the slot in the intermediate and deep ranges of the field. Well, now you've got a player who poses that threat that the defense has to respect. And so really imagine putting with Pitts and London and then taking, Patterson and Robinson. You can spread the field with those guys and force defenders to really declare some level of respect for any of those four players on a level that someone's going to be left with a real mismatch, maybe two players. But, you can't disrespect Patterson in that role inside, and you can't do that with Robinson. So you're looking at a back who overall, has improved his game over the course of his career, because when you first watch him, maybe like 2-3 years ago, you saw the athletic ability, but he leaned so much on that sometimes he would do some things where you would like to see with interior runs that when a player makes a cutback, that he hugs the block that's on the front side, so that when he makes that cutback inside or to the outside, wherever he should be hugging that nearest blocker, he's doing that in a manner where the backside pursuit doesn't get as easy of an angle to tackle him. And oftentimes guys like Robinson early in his career, when he would make the cutback or bounce, he would make the move too far towards the pursuit rather than hugging where he was, because you'd rather see him work through the contact of a defender coming off that lead block and be able to put, really get downhill and run through one pad of a defender who's being blocked, rather than bend all the way back into open space. But that open space is quickly going to be occupied by a backside defender who's going to be able to put both pads on him and bring him down. And as his career progressed, you saw him become savvier at understanding how to hug blocks. And if you want to understand a good back who hugs blocks in the NFL, who you can watch, highlights of, go to any of Raheem Mostert's work with the Dolphins or the 49ers, especially on gap plays where you see him work downhill, and you'll see that he stays really tight to one block and almost grazes his shoulder and hips to the hips of his blocker, to the point that sometimes he will have to run through a defender coming off that block. But you'll see how much space he's created as a result of that, so that the backside pursuit can't reach him. And when you have speed, like Mostert does, like Robinson does, now you're maximizing that speed and that momentum. And it's just a little detail that the best backs do, or at least competent NFL runners like Mostert. If we're not going to say he's one of the better backs, he's still a very good runner. And that's one of the things that he does really effectively. So yeah, Aaron Robinson, you're getting a player who's going to be capable of carrying the load. You get someone who really gives, comparison wise, stylistically, I would say he has the receiving potential and the movement skills with the explosion of a guy somewhat like a heavier set Reggie Bush, but also the in between the tackle savvy, the power, the patience, the ability to process what his eye sees through what he does with his footwork so it's efficient, and still be dynamic with that efficiency, like Frank Gore. And if you combine those two guys, maybe the answer to that equation is a young LaDainian Tomlinson.
Yeah, I do want to pick your brain on some of these player comps, because I did do a breakdown of Bijan and I did compare him favorably to Frank Gore. I want to talk a little bit about how he compares with the last high-level running back in Saquon Barkley as we continue today's episode here with Matt Waldman of the Rookie Scouting Portfolio. So we'll get more into how Bijan compares with Saquon Barkley and Frank Gore coming up on today's episode, guys. But first, I want to tell you about a delicious snack that is not only delicious because it's covered in 100% real chocolate, but it's healthy for you and it's low in sugar, calories, but has a whopping 17 grams of protein. Comes in a variety of delicious flavors. And of course, this snack that I'm talking about is Built Bar, the protein bar that tastes like a candy bar. And Built Bars are very convenient to you because they can be found at Walmart or Sam's Club. You can run into the pharmacy section in Walmart, grab a 4-bar box of any number of flavors that Built Bar provides, like cookies and cream or double chocolate. You can go to Sam's and get a 13-bar box of brownie batter puff or churro. And of course, you can always head on over to the website built.com, where you can get the limited time flavors, right? Such as red velvet or birthday cake, on sale now. You can get the crispy. They have the puff Built Bars that are the protein infused marshmallow. Now they have the opposite, the crispy in flavors like peanut butter and mint chocolate. So head on over to built.com right now. And when you do, use the promo code LOCKEDON15. You'll get 15% off your order. Again, that's LOCKEDON15 for 15% off your order at built.com.
You know, the great thing about Barkley when you saw him at Penn State was he had incredible size. He ran low to the ground. You saw dynamic movement, jump cuts, great stop, start, acceleration, and he certainly has power, the ability to run through contact, and that once he got into open field, he had the afterburners to, accelerate and separate even from defensive backs in the open field, and you certainly liked his ability to catch the football. The difference between Barkley and Robinson is that Barkley's a little more dynamic with his movements overall. He can make some of the more highlight level jump cuts that move across multiple gaps, and some of the stop-start moves and fakes that he executes are, kind of highlight reel stuff. But the difference is that Barkley tended to lean really hard on that athletic ability to his detriment. Even at Penn State, you would see him forsake open creases that he should see as open, even if there's a defender in it, and attack downhill and set up that defender later in the run, as opposed to trying to cut back or bounce outside. And as a result of that, you would see Barkley make moves that would be an attempt to get, a 30, 40, 50-yard gain on a play where he could have gotten an easy 5 to 7. And when he fails to get that 30 to 40, which happens more often than not, because rarely do you break gains like that, he'd end up losing yards. So he didn't manage the game well. Your Frank Gore comparison is a very good one, because what made Frank Gore such a prized player, even into his mid-30s, is that coaches want running backs to manage the game. They understand that when they look at a stacked box, that when the running back sees a stacked box pre-snap, they see the potential for a run blitz, or they understand and they look at what their play call is, and they're thinking about the down and distance, and they think, okay, it's 2nd and 5. We're backed up in our own territory inside, say, the 15, and I need to get in the box stacked here. Maybe there's a chance for me to make this cutback that's risky, and I might break it for, for an 80-yard gain. But more likely what's going to happen is if I can't hit that cutback, I'm going to get stuffed for a 3-yard loss. So I need to make sure that I'm following the play design as intended and get the hard yards, because we'd much rather have a 3rd and 5 or a 3rd and 3 or 3rd and 1 than a 3rd and 8 or a 3rd and 10, because you lost yards trying to hit the lottery with the run. And Frank Gore was a master at that. And there are so many backs in the league that think when they enter the league that their athletic ability is going to propel them to make huge plays. Reggie Bush, as we saw, was, fell victim to that early on in his career. And then once he matured, even though he had some injuries, you saw a much more diligent runner. Gore was always skilled at making the best choices. And that's why scouts and running back coaches would tell me year after year that he was the standard that running back coaches in the NFL would show players to say, you need to study his tape and understand how he runs gap plays, how he runs inside zone, how, which are some of the harder plays to run between the tackles. And Robinson is much more Frank Gore in that area and much more mature. Earlier in his career, it looked like he could go down that road of what Barkley's done. But he started to get savvier with his decision-making and now understands how to manage the game much better. You'll still occasionally see it happen. I mean, even someone like Nick Chubb, who I revere as a running back, I think is one of the best decision makers in the league right now and has almost Saquon Barkley's athletic ability on top of that. He's a guy that even with him, occasionally, if a team can be really gap disciplined and sound, they can force a running back to get a little impatient and try to make plays creatively that maybe they shouldn't. It's just like quarterbacks, that the more you hit them, the more erratic their decisions are. The more you can plug up those gaps and force them to consider cutbacks, earlier in runs, the more likely you're going to get them to make mistakes. And so, Barkley still to this day tends to be more impatient, as one of the more impatient running backs with managing the game. He's gotten better at it, but it's still not a strength of his. Bijan Robinson, I would say, the instances of impatience and losing discipline are much fewer entering the league at this point than what it was with Barkley.
So because you saw this progress from Bijan at the college level, you like the potential for him to continue progressing down this path at the NFL level?
I absolutely do, because when you look at those types of decisions, you may understand that earlier in his career with the issues that he had, that there will be some lapses, and he'll probably get frustrated trying to make a play. Like he's a young man in his 20s who's getting paid a lot of money, who's going to come to Atlanta, and all he's going to hear about is, and he knows he's the man. They drafted him in the first round. He's going to get the ball a lot. He's going to be thinking, I'm going to be getting a chance to be a league leader in rushing, because look at what Arthur Smith did with Derrick Henry. I'm going to get the chance to be the next Derrick Henry in terms of production, and they're going to count on me. And as someone you got to have a healthy ego to an extent to be able to play in the league and to have the confidence to do things and make things happen, and finding that balance, understanding, for him, it's going to be about understanding, well, at Texas, occasionally I could beat this 310-pound defensive tackle who's got this angle in the backfield. I can outrun him. There are going to be some plays he's going to learn fairly quickly that, oh, I can't do that in the league. Instead of it being one guy in the Big 12 who can do that against me, there's one every week in my division alone, not to mention outside of that. There may be even 3 or 4 guys on the field who I look at and go, there's no way they can track me down. And they all can if I'm not disciplined. So you're going to see some of those missed starts most likely, but I think you'll also see him correct it fast, because he already did that in the league. And I remember interviewing DeMarco Murray way back in the day when he was with Oklahoma, and I saw him as a very athletic player early, and then he had some injuries and he changed his style a little bit. And I remember asking him about it, and he's a running back coach in Oklahoma now, but I asked him about it. He said, I learned pretty quickly at Oklahoma that I couldn't out athlete people all the time. He goes, and every back pretty much has to learn that, unless his name's Bo Jackson. So you just kind of, as good as Robinson is, he'll have some fits and moments which you'll look at and say, that was an immature decision. But if he already is demonstrating that now, the chances are really strong that maturity is going to carry over, and he'll have, progress is not a linear thing most of the time. So you'll see some hills and valleys, but the overall trend will be upward.
Absolutely. So guys, Locked On Bijan is coming to an end, but we're not done here on Locked On Falcons. And we'll wrap up today's episode talking with Matt Waldman about undrafted free agent wide receiver out of Oklahoma Baptist, Keelan Harris, who Matt likes, and talk about his chances of sticking on the Falcons roster to wrap up today's episode. Last question for you, Matt. You mentioned Keelan Harris last time you were on talking about some of the receivers, the Oklahoma Baptist receiver that the Falcons signed as an UDFA. And you know, I'm curious because I know you were also a big fan of Olamide Zacchaeus when he was a UDFA for the Falcons 4 or 5 years ago out of the University of Virginia. Is there a similar skill set between OZ and Harris? What can the Falcons expect from Harris?
There is. And also a guy that you guys had in camp who flashed a fair bit, who's now on the LA Rams and seems to have stuck to the roster, in Austin Trammell, an explosive player, can play from the slot, who has great short area quickness, which means that they can also stretch the seam when you need them to. Now, the big difference between Trammell, Zacchaeus, and Harris is that, you know, Trammell and Zacchaeus proved it at Division I football. Oklahoma Baptist, obviously, is far away from that. And so you wonder how well he'll fare against NFL caliber athletes because he encountered a lot fewer of them at his division level of football. But from what I saw a player with a really wide catch radius who could make difficult grabs against contact or tight coverage where he had to work against the momentum of his break to reach back for the football. So natural hands, really good hand-eye coordination, sudden quickness, really good movement skills, things that play into becoming a good route runner and pass catcher and an open field player. So as long as the confidence remains as he moves to that next level, I would expect that he has some moments in camp that can earn him additional opportunities. And as long as he has the mindset and the emotional ability to handle the notched up pressure that comes with playing in the NFL, I think you've found yourselves a nice free agent who should make the team and maybe develop into a contributor.
Well, definitely looking forward to that. Matt, really appreciate you coming on, telling us about Bijan Robinson and and Keelan Harris. See, I'm already making the replacement.
You're ready. Yeah.
That he's ready to go to fill that OZ role. But let the people know when and where they can find your stuff and where they can, what type of information they can get in the rookie scouting portfolio now that the draft is over.
Sure. The Rookie Scouting Portfolio is an 18-year-old publication. I have a pre-draft and a post-draft. The pre-draft came out April 1st. The post-draft came out about a week and a half ago. Post-draft's more fantasy-oriented, so if you want a cheat sheet with tiered rankings that gives you kind of a calculation of where you can get the best value for each player by looking at the average draft position of players versus my post-draft rankings. I give you depth chart analysis that's spans over 200 rookies at the quarterback, running back, wide receiver, and tight end positions. So you get, and even reviews of who I think were good fits, bad fits, or at least difficult fits for guys, thoughts on several undrafted free agent players as well. And then, of course, there's the Rookie Scouting Portfolio pre-draft that you get along with it for $21.95, which is really the most comprehensive look at rookie prospects at those 4 positions that you're going to find available. It's one of the 2 most purchased draft guides for cross-checking purposes by, NFL personnel people, according to folks like Alex Brown, who is the head of recruiting at SMU, formerly worked at Rice, and with Tom Herman at Houston. And he meets with these, personnel folks every day. So he knows what they get, what they like to use as a cross-checking device, and tells me regularly that the RSP is one of the 2 most purchased there. So if you want something that's rooted in real football, but also gives you an eye towards fantasy football, you can find it at mattwaldman.com.
All right, guys, that's it for us. We'll probably have more from Matt Waldman next week when we do probably Locked On Desmond Ridder week, right? And we'll talk about Desmond Ridder. We'll talk about other players on this offense that get me excited. Jonnu Smith and Parker Hesse haven't gotten enough love this offseason, so we'll get into that. We'll probably still talk about Bijan Robinson as well, and talk about how those players help Desmond Ridder, how Ridder can help those players this upcoming season. If you're looking for that Matthew Bergeron scouting report, comprehensive film breakdown, My plan initially right now is that will be at the end of next week, so probably 1 week from today, whichever day you're listening to this, Thursday night, Friday afternoon, Saturday, whenever. So that will be the plan for that. So continue to make Locked On Falcons your first listen all week long, guys. And of course, you can do so on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts, and check out the Locked On NFL Scouting podcast with the Draft Dudes. They recently did a breakdown of Desmond Ridder and the Falcons outlook. They really like the Falcons outlook. They were not as big a fan on Desmond Ridder and a couple other places. So find out where Kyle Krabs and Joe Marino, differ or share thoughts, by checking out Locked On NFL Scouting the other day. I think it was the Thursday episode. So go check that out on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. It's all part of Locked On Podcast Network, guys. Have a great weekend. Your team every